Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. President Trump warns another Armada is floating towards Iran as he says time is running out for Tehran. Meanwhile, the US president says things will de-escalate in Minnesota following the fatal shootings of 2 US citizens by ICE agents. And Syria's leader arrives in Moscow to discuss bilateral ties and the situation in the Middle East with Vladimir Putin. Another US Armada is said to be floating towards Iran as President Trump hopes Tehran will make a deal with Washington. Trump had previously threatened military intervention in Iran following the crackdown on protests and an internet blackout. Now, the USS Abraham Lincoln has arrived in Middle East waters, although its precise location does remain top secret. Here's what the US president told crowds at a rally in Iowa.
In June, we obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity in Operation Midnight Hammer. You saw that. People have been waiting for 22 years to do that, and we were right at the end. They were about a month away from having a nuclear weapon. We had to do it. And by the way, there's another beautiful Armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see. I hope they make a deal. I hope they make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time.
Let's get the opinion of Norman Roule, former National Intelligence Manager for Iran at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. Norman, thank you so much for joining me. It's great to have you on the show. So there we are. We just heard from President Donald Trump. He's renewed threats to attack Iran, saying a massive armada is heading to the country, ready for violence if necessary. Is the situation likely to escalate really soon?
The president has stated in his announcement that you just heard that he is pursuing a diplomatic approach. He has also recently applied significant economic sanctions on Iran, which are still rolling out, and the Abraham Lincoln Aircraft Carrier Task Force is just arriving in an area that has also seen a significant increase in air assets and air defense capacity. So we have a significant military, diplomatic, and economic pressure campaign against Iran to produce a diplomatic solution to a longstanding U.S. request, which does have international support, and that is to reduce the nuclear and missile and regional aggression threat that Iran poses.
So it's quite interesting because, Norman, you were just talking to me about a diplomatic solution. Do you think that this is actually something that we're going to see? Do you think Iran is willing to come to the negotiating table? We do know that the Iranian government has been significantly up against it at home with the anti-government protesters that have been going on.
Iran will likely come to the table with a series of proposals it seeks to buy time. Its traditional approach has been to seek indirect negotiations. It believes that wastes time and extends talks and reduces the number of demands by its Western partners. That has traditionally been a successful approach for Iran. Iran will also try to last out any pressure campaign by its economic adversaries in sanctions. But the president's rhetoric has been consistent, and he doesn't tolerate someone wasting his time. And I think the Iranians have heard this from a number of their diplomatic interlocutors. It's unclear, however, if the Iranians are taking that seriously. They have not shown themselves to be wise decision makers for several years. I think there is a danger of military activity because of that.
And what do you think the reaction is going to be inside Iran? Because, you know, we have heard from the country's foreign minister today, and he said he's not been in contact with the US envoy, Steve Witkoff, in recent days, requesting negotiations. There seems to be some differentiating tone there when it comes to the US saying make a deal, Iran saying nobody's been speaking to us. What do you think they're thinking right now?
Well, I think it's the choice of language that he's using. He's not been in direct contact recent days. That just tells you it could be anything from a direct phone call to the last 3 days. There's no question that Iran seeks a diplomatic solution on its own terms. It's been public about this, and they have stated repeatedly that they have attempted to reach out through interlocutors offering a half deal that the United States will not accept. That's the issue. They wish to retain a nuclear program that is capable of building a weapon, a missile program that is capable of building not only missiles possible to threaten our neighbors, that they could one day build an ICBM capable of threatening the United States, as well as the Quds Force. Washington will no longer accept this. The president will no longer accept this, and that's where we are. So the Iranian position is just a propaganda statement.
And the messaging coming out of Iran is that if there's any US strike, it will be considered all-out war. Norman, how concerning is this for the region, as Iran still has considerable military assets?
Well, the Iranians certainly do have considerable military assets. The region is not involved in this conflict. The United States is not approaching this with regional partners. There's no reason for Iran to attack the region, its neighbors. If it does so, it's pulling the region in on its own terms. It's not doing that because of the United States. And Iran also knows it cannot compete with U.S. military technology. Its military forces are simply unable to defend themselves against what the U.S. Can bring against them. That doesn't mean they can't respond with missiles or drones, and they will certainly attempt to do so in some sort of an attack. But Iran's military is professional, and they understand their capabilities in comparison to the United States, and they're quite poor.
And just something that I noticed, Norman, is we saw Donald Trump posting on Truth Social today, and it was quite interesting because he's warning Iran to make a deal with the US on nuclear weapons. But just weeks ago, Donald Trump also took to Truth Social when it came to the anti-government protests and encouraged people in Iran to keep protesting. He also said help is on the way, and many people thought Donald Trump was going to possibly strike Iran during these protests that we did see. That didn't happen. We're seeing another set of threats from Donald Trump. Are these just empty threats from the US president, or should they be taken seriously?
They should certainly be taken seriously. Absolutely. And I certainly don't speak for the president, but I think the president most likely would make the case that he stated that the extreme violence was underway in Iran, and that if it did not stop, he would consider military action. That violence was horrific and extreme, but it does appear to have subsided. His issue now is what his issue has been for his current term and the previous term, Iran's nuclear, missile, and regional adventurism program. And he is adamant that this must be resolved. So his position has been fairly consistent. It's just now he believes he's going to take advantage of Iran's weakened state and pursue this with diplomatic, economic, and military tools.
And it's quite interesting, Norman, because it's very difficult for us to get any of the exact numbers coming out of Iran because there has been an internet blackout in the country following those anti-government protests. What's next for Iran if the US does strike? I think these are the questions that many people are asking. Could there possibly be a power vacuum? How will this play out? What's the long-term goal here by the US?
Well, if you're in Iran, what is clear is that the situation is unsustainable. They have had such frequent nationwide unrest over the same causes since 2017 that you are really facing three threats: that either the government changes its policies to survive, or the people will change the government, or an external action such as that being undertaken by the United States will change the government. That's inevitability right now. They're facing the transition to a post-revolutionary leadership generation. It's inevitable. This is a change in their history. They're just just at an inflection point in their own history, and they're not proving themselves very good at making a decision. And that's why I say we're facing a likelihood of military action, because they seem to be unable to make decisions on these strategic issues.
Norman Roule, brilliant to have your analysis. Thank you so much for your time and for speaking to me.
You're welcome.
Now, the situation in Minnesota is going to de-escalate a little bit. That's according to President Donald Trump, following the second fatal shooting of a U.S. citizen by ICE agents. Speaking to Fox News, Trump spoke about the deaths of Alex Pretty and Renee Good, who were both shot by federal immigration officers in Minneapolis. Trump said Pretty shouldn't have been carried a gun, but didn't agree with members of his administration who called him a domestic terrorist. Take a listen.
We're going to de-escalate a little bit, but I will tell you, you look at the numbers, they're doing better than they've done in many years. I don't like the fact that he was carrying a gun that was fully loaded, and he had 2 magazines with him, and it's pretty unusual. But nobody knows when they saw the gun, how they saw the gun, everything else. Bottom line, it was terrible. Both of them were terrible. The other was terrible, too. And I'm not sure about his parents, but I know her parents were big Trump fans. Makes me feel bad anyway, but, I mean, I guess you could say even worse. You know, Bovino's very good, but he's a pretty out there kind of a guy, and in some cases that's good. Maybe it wasn't good here. But you have to understand, when I watch some of the people that I've been watching over the last few weeks, these are paid insurrectionists. These are paid agitators. These people aren't normal, like, oh, gee, that, you know, they're incensed about anything.
We can now cross live to Las Vegas, Nevada, to speak to Republican strategist and former Nevada Republican chairwoman, Amy Tarkanian. Amy, good to have you back on the show with me. Thank you for your time today. Amy, I just want to start. Donald Trump appears to be a president in retreat as he faces criticism from both sides of the political aisle over ICE agents in Minneapolis. How is he currently weathering the storm?
Well, I don't know if I would call it retreat. I think it's pretty clear if you see the video from multiple angles that there is a problem and there needs to be accountability. There needs to be possibly, new oversight, some more equipping, training of these ICE federal agents. They are overwhelmed, obviously. And yes, he is correct that there are paid individuals that do go in to agitate. However, Alex Pretty was allowed to carry a weapon. He had, everything that made it lawful for him to do so. It is reported that he didn't have his documentation on him, which that could be a problem, but it's pretty clear that things got out of control very quickly. So it doesn't matter really what your political affiliation is. This is a matter of safety. This is something that I think we need to have extreme transparency on, because now that the public is well aware that this took place, and it wasn't just one singular situation, unfortunately, the public needs answers, and we demand answers.
And the shooting of Alex Pretty is still the big story in the US, and Trump's criticism of him for carrying a gun. And you just actually mentioned that yourself to me, Amy. The US gun lobby, the NRA, has hit back. Is the president questioning the Second Amendment and US gun rights? And you want things to be transparent, but how concerning is this messaging?
Sure. Well, it's mixed messaging, and it's not honest in the fact that he did have the correct law-abiding process done in order to lawfully carry a weapon. That is his right. And it doesn't matter where he's taking it to, whether it be a grocery store that allows weapons, whether it be, a protest. He is lawfully able to carry a weapon. Now, the question was, did he brandish it? Did he pull it out on another federal agent? agent. And according to the video, that was not the case. In fact, it looked like one of the agents actually removed his weapon, left the scene, and then the other agents who were left behind continued to punch and kick both Alex and the other woman that he was trying to help get up in the first place off the ground. And then we're assuming that there possibly may have been a shot that went off maybe when the removal happened, which then scared the other agents. But then they proceeded to not just shoot once or twice, but at least half a dozen, if not more times. So there needs to be a very thorough investigation. And as mentioned earlier, they need to be transparent with the public, because now everyone is just disgusted and quite honestly, very fearful.
Amy, do you think that the Trump administration is losing its way on the immigration issue? I just heard you speak there and you said everyone is disgusted and you need things to be transparent. What's going so wrong here?
Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I could say, you know, the fact that the president did campaign heavily on making sure that border security was going to be a priority. And he did make it very clear that if you are here illegally, you need to either remove yourself and go back to the country of your origin and then try to come back and get in line the correct way, or else there will be massive repercussions. And so there has been plenty of that the warnings given. Now, the fact that we have conflicting reports of, you know, children being removed from their parents, you know, or them going into certain areas of towns and cities and doing a complete massive sweep and accidentally taking a U.S. citizen here and there, that is yet to actually be found to be true in most circumstances. However, just one of those instances actually being true is too many. And so I think that we need to make sure that our local and our federal agents are actually cooperating with one another. And the unfortunate situation that we're seeing in Minnesota is that you also have politicians who are hell-bent on saying we do not need federal agents in, and that's actually causing, I think, even more of a problem. So if you had everybody working on the same page, I think we'd see less of the situations like the Alex Preddy one that unfortunately took place.
And I guess that's why Donald Trump wants Tom Homan in there to try and get this dialogue up with the Democrats in those areas. But I just want to ask you a final question. And Trump has accused the Congresswoman Ilhan Omar of organizing an attack against herself after she had an unknown liquid sprayed on her. What do you make of this?
I think that's childish, and I think that's an assumption that he probably needs to keep within his private circle. I don't think that fanning the flames helps anything. And if that were the case, then shame on her. And if not, you know, I think that's a scary situation. And actually, there has been a dramatic increase in attacks on our politicians. And so, you know, I think it's to be taken seriously, not to be made a joke of.
Amy Tarkanian, as always, good to have you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Let's continue this conversation with retired Brigadier General Peter Zwack, who's in Newport, Rhode Island. And it was quite interesting there, Peter. I don't know if you heard my conversation with Amy, but she was definitely saying now is the time for people to talk, for the Democrats and Republicans to come together. But in your opinion, Peter, is this a climb down from President Donald Trump following the political fallout over the fatal shooting of 2 U.S. citizens by ICE officers?
Yes, thank you for having me. The president right now, unfortunately, just inflames when he speaks. He, yes, there's an attempted conciliation, and then a dart is thrown, and it's not healthy. And this is manifested in the way our Congress reacts back and forth. and then our population. Well, we've heard it from several people. We suffer from an enormous trust deficit in the United States. And you can see it playing out in the aftermath of the tragic shootings in Minnesota the last couple days. There's no civility between the political parties. I'm retired military. The veterans, veterans groups are livid at what happened to the medic, to the medic who was shot just 3 days ago. I mean, it's just one thing after another. The trust deficit is bad, and it also plays out into our foreign affairs and our policies. And you see this.
So, Peter, you actually seem pretty frustrated when you're talking to me right now about the US President Donald Trump, the situation that's been unfolding in Minneapolis. And of course, an ICU nurse lost his life. We also had another US citizen lose her life. Right now, what can the Democrats do to change things, to tone down the rhetoric, to make things a little bit easier right now for the US and get that trust back from the people?
Leigh-Ann, it is a great question. And unfortunately, I don't think it's going to come between the various elements and groups and advocates in our population. The moral tone, the verbal tone needs to start with leadership to include Congress. Right now, as we know, there is a hearing right now with Marco Rubio in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, finally having a discussion about our interventions, I'll say, and the trust deficit we have internationally. Our whole body politic, to include our population, doesn't trust each other. I think that a lot of people really want to get it back on track. Maybe the government, both parties or multiple parties, see that it is going too far. And who knows? All I know is that I think that we have as I said before, and it's being recognized, huge trust deficit. Groups don't trust each other. Population don't trust each other. The whole issue with Minnesota and ICE and all of that, it starts with trust. They don't trust them, and for good reason, because they've come in like stormtroopers. So we've got a problem, and we need to work on our own house. Well, meanwhile, not burning our foreign relations down, as we are seeing with Greenland, Denmark, and NATO. I'm a lifetime NATO guy, so I've been very, very, very troubled by what I've seen.
So, Peter, I just want to speak to you a little bit about, we've been discussing, and you've been talking to me about the lack of trust, these deep divisions in society in the US at the moment, and we're watching pictures on our screen, and we can see that play out in places like Minneapolis, where ICE agents have been delivered and where they're going. But listen, the big question here is the midterm elections, they're not far off. Donald Trump has them in his mind's eye. He went to a rally in Iowa yesterday. We saw thousands of protesters gather there. Do you think that now maybe Donald Trump will think, I need to focus on domestic issues and not so much on foreign policy to get things back on track?
I think it's a very, very good question. And I think for his political survival, he must. Now, in doing so, calm down the foreign policy and rhetoric.
But then it's interesting you say that, because he just
focus on our own narrative domestically.
And it's interesting you say that, because you say calm down on the foreign policy, but he just put on Truth Social another warning to Iran, Peter.
Your point is great, because he has so much of his own making, kettles, if you will, bubbling right now, both in foreign policy and then this huge domestic problem, which was already simmering, but blew out just now with Minnesota and is nowhere near resolution. I am very glad that this is now in our Congress, where it should be, should have been from the get-go. Where senators and representatives have a hard time speaking and are looking for rudder guidance, if you will, from the White House, especially on the Republican side. So yes, we have major problems. However, they aren't all standalone. I mean, the international issues could overwhelm or subsume domestic problems, but in the same token, our domestic problems could overwhelm whatever we're trying to do internationally. And what we don't want are if you will, a situation where one is being used to mask the other. And this goes back at the trust deficit in my own country. And you see this in Minnesota. People don't trust each other, and it's really dangerous. But at least now our people in Congress are talking about it. I think the White House, or even our gun control people, which is a major issue in the states, have been put back on their back feet based on the president saying we got to get a handle on the guns. So we are in a swirl right now. We need to stay clear-eyed on the main big objectives. As you mentioned, one of them in my mind is foreign policy and our allies. We can talk about our threats, but you need your allies to deal with your threats. And then within the United States, we just got to find a way, both sides, to calm each other down. And this plays out into our population.
Peter, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to leave it there. But it was brilliant to speak to you. And it was a really interesting conversation, especially on the trust deficit you're talking to me about. Peter Zwack, thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Syria's President Ahmed al-Sharaa is in Moscow today to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. It's thought the two leaders will discuss bilateral ties as well as ongoing conflicts in the Middle East. It follows a ceasefire agreement between the Syrian army and the Kurdish-led SDF after recent fighting in northeast Syria. I'm now joined by Faris Zwirahn, Syrian-American political analyst and lecturer at Princeton University. Faris, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you on the show. So, the Syrian President Ahmed al-Sharaa is meeting his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Moscow today. Just 3 months after their last meeting, what will be up for discussion this time round?
Hi, Leigh-Ann. Thank you for having me. I think we can look at Shara's visit to Russia from two different angles this time. The first one is related to the future of the Russian forces and bases in Syria and creating some sort of power balance in Syria and the region. And the second one related to possible relations and cooperation between Syria economically and militarily. So I'll talk about the first one first. There is an interest first by the United States, by the Trump administration, that the Russian bases should remain in Syria for the time being. And that's the same interest shared by Israel. And the argument behind that, at least to my understanding and to my connections and analysis in the news I know from here in DC, that there is a fear from the Israelis that if the Russians leave Syria permanently, that will create a vacuum, or that will strengthen the Turkish presence in Syria and create more influence, and the Israelis see Turkey here as a possible threat, not only Iran. So this is the opposite of the Biden administration wanted. Earlier, as you know, the Sharaa came to power towards the end of the Biden administration, and then the request or the demand was to remove all of the Russian bases. However, the Trump administration here seems to want the opposite. However, we shouldn't look at that Trump has any bad relation with the Turks, if you like, because he does have good relation with Turkey and with President Erdogan. It's just a matter of creating balance in Syria. The second angle I look at this, what could be possibly discussed here is possible future economic and military cooperation between Syria and Russia. As we know, Syria was for a long time the main ally of Russia in the Middle East since the Soviet time. Most of the former Syrian regime and governments, if you like, the military was provided by Russia. Most of the weapons and the infrastructure in the military was Russian. So we might see actually new agreements lead to that. There is also a possible, or there are some talks about possible role for Russia in rebuilding Syria after the fall of Assad. There's also a possible discussion about handing over some of the former regime affiliates. However, that is not related to Bashar al-Assad, as many Syrians hope, including me. Putin won't turn Assad back, hand him to Syria. It's probably the second or the third level former Bashar al-Assad affiliates that might be delivered to Syria. We don't know. This is just speculation at the moment.
It's really interesting what you said to me. You said that the US actually wants Russia to keep a presence in Syria, as you and I are discussing, for lots of the reasons you gave me. And I find that absolutely fascinating, because right now the US is trying to reach a deal with Russia on Ukraine, putting pressure on both sides to come to the negotiating table. So it's really interesting how they're all going to work together in Syria. But I just want to move into the fact that al-Sharaa has repeatedly pushed for Russia to hand over Assad and his wife, you just mentioned it, and about $2 billion in liquid assets held by his family in Russian banks. Will Putin ever agree to this?
That's the $1 million question, Leigh-Ann. I personally don't think, and many people might agree, I don't know, that Putin will hand over Assad and his wife personally. That will send the wrong message to Putin's allies elsewhere in the world. So if someone is currently supporting Putin or an ally of Putin and see Putin handing over one of his main allies for a long time over to Syria, what would you do? You wouldn't even trust Putin. And I think Putin cares about being trusted by his allies. So I don't think that's a possibility. However, I do think there might be a possibility of handing over what you just mentioned, liquidities and some of Assad's wealth that was transferred to Russia. That is possible. I think that could happen.
And Faris, it's so interesting because, we've been talking about the different dynamics that are happening in Syria now that al-Sharaa has come into power, and we saw Bashar al-Assad leave. But since coming to power, al-Sharaa has developed closer ties with the US and Israel. How is this reshaping Syria? How different is Syria looking now?
Great. From a Syrian government perspective, I think what I heard multiple times, and from the people I talked to in my recent visit, I just came back from a 6-week visit to Syria, and I think the consensus is Syria wants zero problems with its neighbors, zero problems with the world powers. So they want a good relationship with the United States, and they want the United States support, and we see that turned around. They also don't want problems with Russia. So they want good relations with Russia, and they want good relations with neighboring countries. So as you know, as many people have been following the news, know that there is an undergoing negotiations between the Israelis and the Syrians about a possible security agreement. So that is one of the main issues Syria wants to achieve here. They're trying hard to stabilize the country in terms of security. They're trying to neutralize any possible threats from its neighbors. So Syria is headed toward the following: to have good relationships with everybody as much as possible, even with former enemies, if we consider Russia a former enemy. I don't think we see any possible relations with Iran in the near future unless something major happens in Iran and the current regime collapse. However, Syria wants to have a security in place. They want to have good relations with its neighbors so they can start rebuilding economically and describe the transitional period infrastructure and such.
Faris, it was brilliant to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time and all your insights and analysis today.
Thank you.
Now, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has begun his 3-day visit to China today with a large delegation of business leaders. It's expected the UK is looking to enhance its trade relationship with Beijing. Jan David reports.
It's been more than a year since this handshake between Keir Starmer and Xi Jinping in Brazil. Now, experts are expecting the UK leader's trip to Beijing may reboot ties with China. It's the first visit by a British leader since 2018 and comes amidst a recent flurry of diplomacy between China and Western countries heading against the unpredictability of the US. The visit marks a critical shift after years of strained ties over Beijing's political crackdown in Hong Kong, its unwillingness to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and British allegations of spying. Starmer brings with him a delegation of more than 50 business leaders. He says the UK must recognise the economic opportunities of ties with China while remaining vigilant about security threats.
The absence of engagement is just staggering. A dereliction of duty, because it means that, unlike our allies, we have not been standing up for our interests. Well, no more. It's time for a serious approach, to reject the simplistic binary choice, neither golden age nor ice age.
China says it's ready to deepen cooperation and build trust with the UK.
Against the backdrop of a complex and volatile international situation, enhanced communication and cooperation between China and the UK serve the common interests of the two peoples and are conducive to promoting world peace, sustainability and development.
Experts expect business to be a political adhesive.
The UK doesn't necessarily have a lot that China needs, but I do think the UK has a lot that China wants. And it'll be interesting to see those areas where the UK really does excel, things like life sciences, things like professional services and green finance.
His schedule includes a meeting with the President Xi Jinping on Thursday before travelling to Shanghai on Friday for talks with local executives. Jan David, Al Arabiya English.
Let's take a look at the top business news now. Gold has broken above $5,300 an ounce for the first time ahead of a Federal Reserve decision. The rally follows comments from President Trump signalling support for a weaker dollar and lower interest rates, with markets now watching closely for remarks from the Fed Chair, Jerome Powell. And it's turned to all the sports news now. Novak Djokovic's chase for a record 25th Grand Slam is still alive after he scraped into the Australian Open semi-finals when Lorenzo Musetti pulled out with an injury while leading by 2 sets. Next up, Djokovic faces the defending champion Jannik Sinner. Definitely one to watch. A reminder of our top stories. President Trump warns another Armada is floating towards Iran as he says time is running out for Tehran. Meanwhile, the US president says things will de-escalate in Minnesota following the fatal shootings of 2 US citizens by ICE agents. And Syria's leader arrives in Moscow to discuss bilateral ties and the situation in the Middle East with Vladimir Putin. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. We'll be back in a couple of hours with a W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you for watching.